Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense here on YouTube. So today we're going to talk about what happens when your credit card account gets sold to someone else and they come after you to collect. I'll have more on that in just a moment. One of the things that you'll find when you look at your credit card contract, the document that you signed when you signed up for your credit card, is that the person who, or the entity that gave you the credit card, reserves the right to sell your account to someone else. Now, for the most part, they don't do that willy-nilly. They do it in a situation, two different situations where they do that. The first is where Bank A gets bought by Bank B. And now when PNC buys BBVA or some other entity, the credit cards that were issued by BBVA now become PNC credit cards. And you would expect that because that's what happens when somebody sells its business. Their assets become the assets of the person who buys the business. The other situation is where you default on that credit card. You can't make the payments for whatever reason. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you got sick. Maybe you had unexpected expenses. Who knows? You go into default, and as a result, you start getting calls. The MasterCard or the Visa people give you 5 or 6 opportunities to bring it up to date, and you just can't do it. And as a result, they default the credit card. You're not charging on it anymore anyway, because as soon as you've missed a couple of payments, they shut off the credit card. And so now you're really kind of stuck. You don't have the credit card and you have this debt, and now the bank has stopped calling, and you think, well, that's got to be a good thing. It usually is not. What will happen is the account will be sold to a third party. There are a number of companies that engage in buying third-party debt. They will go out to each of these banks and say, sell us your defaulted credit card accounts. Why would they do that? Why would they buy something that probably has very little value? Because they know that the statute of limitations in many states is 5 to 7 years. 5 years in some states, 7 years in other states, and in some states, it's 10 years, and that a lot can happen in 10 years. So what happens is what's called an assignment of debt. The bank will assign their right to collect to company ABC. And I'm not going to mention any of these companies' names. If you're interested, you can do a little research and find out who they are. But basically, they will buy a $10,000 credit card account for $100, let's say. It's pennies on the dollar, honestly. They're not paying $10,000 for the right to come get $10,000 from you, because they know, at least as of the time that they buy the debt, that you don't have that money. And so what they're going to do is they're going to be a little sneaky and kind of wait in the weeds for you to develop a little bit better credit standing, and then they will come after you. Back in 2008, the economy crashed, and thousands upon thousands of people went into credit card decline. And as a result, they defaulted on their obligations, and their obligations were sold to these third-party debt collectors. So 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, getting close to the 5-year statute of limitations, these third-party debt collectors now come after you, and they make a demand not just for the $5,000 debt that you owe, but for the default interest rate. Because when you default, you'll probably find that the interest rate, which was calculated before, usually between 10 and 17%, is now as high in some states as 28%. Well, 28% of a $5,000 debt over 5 years can make that debt pretty significant, because what happens is you get 28% of $5,000, even just doing 20%, that's $1,000. You put $1,000 on every year for 5 years, that's $5,000, plus every year the amount of principal goes up because last year's interest was added to it, and now this $5,000 debt that you had is a $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 debt, and you have somebody looking to collect that plus attorney's fees. And they have absolutely no qualms about using exceptionally bad tactics to go after you. I have seen people I've dealt with people in my office who have said that the debt collectors called and said they were sending the sheriff out. Now, what this actually means is different than what people think it means. When the debt collector calls you and tells you that the sheriff is coming for you, the implication is he's coming to arrest you. And a lot of times people feel guilty because they have bought things on credit that they now can't pay for, and they feel a little bit like they've done something wrong. But the fact of the matter is, there is no criminal charge there. Most of the time, you can't go to jail for debt. It's as simple as that. And assuming that you did not defraud the credit card company when you applied for the credit card, then you really don't have anything to worry about. So that's what these third-party debt collectors often do. They make all kinds of serious threats, and they come after people, and usually they're willing to settle for something less than the full amount. If you have a $5,000 debt, they may tell you they'll take $2,500 and call it good. And you wonder how they can stay in business when they've got this $5,000 debt and $2,500 is what they're willing to take. And it's because about $2,400 of that is pure profit. So you have to understand what their business model is to understand and be able to negotiate effectively with them. But frankly, you shouldn't be doing the negotiation. You should turn this over to an attorney. Anytime a debt collector calls you, particularly one of these third-party debt collectors, tell them that you're represented by counsel and that they need to contact your lawyer. And indeed, you should go and get an attorney to represent you in these matters. Now, it is cost prohibitive to go out and hire a private attorney in many instances. They're going to cost somewhere between $100 and $300 an hour to represent you on a case like this. So what you may need to do is go to your local legal aid society if you don't have funds, or there are certain legal aid that are not affiliated with the government. They're not affiliated with a federal or state program. One of those is a group I work for called the Samaritan Center in Jefferson City, Missouri. And of course, if you're a Missouri resident, they are available to help you within reason. Now, they only have so many resources and they only have so many volunteer attorneys, so I'm sure that at some point in time they have to turn people away. But the bottom line is they can probably help you. In addition to that, almost every law school has a legal clinic where they allow their law students to represent clients in circuit court or district court as a student. And they have a law professor that helps them get ready and represent these people in courts of law. And many of these are very great ways to get yourself some legal help from people who have an interest, a true interest in helping you. And it won't cost you anything. So those are things that I think most people don't realize. Now, while a third-party debt collector has every right to come and collect money that you agreed and promised to pay, that's their contractual right, they don't have the right to do so abusively. And the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is meant to put a stop to that. You can go find that online at ftc.gov and read it yourself and understand what debt collectors can and cannot do. It's beyond the scope of this video for me to go into that. Well, that's my take on third-party debt collections and debt collectors generally. I think that As a general rule, it's not the kind of law I would ever be interested in practicing, because nobody really wants to represent big corporations against mom and pop, individuals who, for no other reason than the fact that they've had some bad luck, are in a debt situation. If you found this interesting or helpful or useful, I'd really appreciate if you'd smash that like button for me. And also, if you haven't already, please go over and subscribe to our channel and touch the notification bell so that you can be notified anytime we release a video here on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day. I'll catch you here next time.